The vastness of the galaxy was calm, scattered stars shining like cold eyes across the void. Armadas of the Concordance gathered near the edge of a system known only for its military staging grounds. Thousands of ships floated in silence, their hulls glowing faintly with power, their weapons armed and ready. To the alien commanders, this was another day of strength, another display that no outsider could ever challenge. Their fleets had crushed rebellions, broken empires, and enforced their will for centuries. They believed themselves untouchable. On the bridge of the lead flagship, Admiral Vare of the Zell Dominion spoke with arrogance. His voice echoed across the command chamber as he boasted of his fleet's power. "We are the galaxy's hammer. No creature, no world, no forgotten species can stand against us." Around him, officers nodded, their eyes gleaming with certainty. They had numbers beyond counting. They had weapons that could scorch planets. They had never known fear. Then the alarms began. The sound was sharp, shrill, and different from the usual battle warnings. It carried a strange weight that made even the most seasoned veterans pause. Across the fleet's sensors, a single signal pulsed, steady, calm, and unmistakably alien. The officers scrambled, hands dancing over consoles, but the readings were clear. Something had entered the system. Not a fleet. Not a formation. Just one ship. Admiral Vare leaned forward, his ridged brow furrowing. "Display it." The view screen shifted, and gasps spread across the bridge. Against the backdrop of the stars, a massive dark vessel glided silently into the sector. It bore no known insignia, no registration codes, and no diplomatic broadcasts. Its design was sharp, predatory, surface-lined with faint golden lights that pulsed like veins of fire beneath black armor. It was like nothing they had ever seen. The silence broke with laughter. A captain from the Avar Collective scoffed over the coms, his voice mocking. "One ship? Do they think to intimidate us with a relic? We have tens of thousands of vessels here." His words spread quickly, fueling the pride of the assembled commanders. Many joined in, declaring it a mistake, a fool's challenge. To them, this was not a threat, but a chance to humiliate some forgotten race. And yet, beneath their laughter, a thread of unease wound its way through the fleet. The ship did not broadcast demands. It did not retreat in the face of overwhelming numbers. It only drifted closer, silent, steady, as if it had no reason to fear. On smaller ships, younger soldiers whispered nervously. Old myths returned to their mind, stories told long ago of a species that once walked among the stars, a species mocked and driven into silence. The word passed from mouth to mouth, human, but most had never seen a human, and many believed they were just legends. The war councils moved quickly. Orders were sent. Formations shifted into battle lines. Entire wings of cruisers took aim, their cannons glowing with lethal energy. The unknown ship was still silent, unmoving, almost as if it was waiting. "Fire on my mark," Admiral Vare commanded, his voice sharp and confident. His officers moved with precision, but there was tension in their eyes. The countdown began. The fleet charged their weapons, each ship preparing to unleash a storm, powerful enough to shatter continents. The enemy was alone, outnumbered, surrounded. It should have been nothing more than an execution. But in that moment, as thousands of alien ships pointed their weapons at a single intruder, something shifted. The warship's lights brightened, spreading like flowing rivers across its hull. Its engines flared, not in retreat, but in challenge. Sensors went wild as power levels surged beyond anything the aliens had ever recorded. For the first time in generations, silence fell across the fleets. No commander spoke. No captain laughed. The soldiers who had whispered human myths now gripped their controls, terror prickling at their spines. The order to fire trembled on Admiral Vare's lips, but hesitation crept into his voice. He stared at the vessel and felt, for the first time, something he had never admitted possible. Doubt. The unknown warship did not speak. It did not broadcast warnings. It only stood against them all. Like a predator circling prey that had not yet realized its fate, the fleets of the galaxy thought themselves invincible. They had no idea that their era of dominance was about to end in fire and silence. And somewhere in the shadows of that ship, unseen and unspoken, humanity had returned to the stars. The countdown continued. Weapons charged. Tension burned in the void. The galaxy's mightiest armadas were moments away from learning a truth that would shatter everything they believed. And in the cold emptiness of space, the warship waited. The fleets of the galaxy floated in their formations, weapons charged and hungry for destruction. Thousands of alien warships stood ready, their captains whispering promises of swift victory. They had mocked the lone intruder, convinced that nothing could withstand the combined might of so many empires. Yet as the minutes passed, the mood began to shift. The unknown human vessel had not moved. It did not retreat. It did not plead. It simply waited, silent and steady, its golden lines glowing brighter, as if it breathed with hidden power. On the command bridge of the Zell flagship, Admiral Vare clenched his fists. He had faced countless battles, but this one felt wrong. The enemy should have been trembling. Instead, it was his own crew who shifted uneasily, their eyes flickering to the screen, as if expecting the dark ship to strike at any moment. Target locked. One officer said, his voice thin with nerves. Coordinates stable. Fire Vare ordered. The void erupted. Beams of plasma, streams of missiles, and energy bolts poured from thousands of alien ships. The sky became a storm of fury, a wall of destruction that no vessel in history could have endured. The firestorm lit the blackness of space, painting the unknown warship in brilliant flashes. Entire sectors of the system burned with the heat of alien weapons, and then it cleared. The alien commanders stared in disbelief. The human ship still stood. Its black armor shimmered, glowing faintly where the blasts had struck. But no cracks appeared, no smoke, no drifting debris. It had absorbed the full might of a galactic armada and had not even fired back. Confusion rippled through the fleets. Voices filled the comms. How is it intact? Our readings make no sense. No shields should withstand this. Panic bled into their arrogance. On one of the Avar warships, a young officer whispered what no one wanted to hear. This feels like a test. It let us fire. His words spread quickly across the channels. If true, the warship was not defending, it was measuring. Then the intruder moved. With a slow, deliberate motion, it turned its prow toward the nearest formation. Its lights flared, brighter than before, casting sharp reflections across the alien fleets. The golden lines carved patterns of fire along its hull, and its engines ignited with an energy that shook sensors to overload. The aliens shouted warnings, scrambling to reposition. Admirals barked orders to retreat and reform. But it was too late. The human warship unleashed its first strike. A single beam lanced outward, bright as a newborn star. It cut through shields, armor, and matter as though they were smoke. Entire squadrons disintegrated in seconds. Dozens of ships vanished in a white explosion that swallowed their screams before they could finish. The survivors recoiled, engines straining, their captains shouting in terror for minutes. That was all it took. From the first shot to the last scream, the alien fleets collapsed like sand before a tidal wave. Every counterattack was swallowed, every desperate maneuver crushed. Ships tried to scatter, but the warship tracked each one with flawless precision. Its weapons shifted, flowing like rivers of light, burning through capital ships that had ruled for centuries. Admiral? Vare's voice broke as he shouted across his command deck. Pull back. Pull back now. But retreat was meaningless. The intruder was faster, stronger, and impossibly efficient. His own flagship trembled as shockwaves from destroyed allies battered its hull. He watched in horror as entire wings of his proud fleet evaporated in silence. On the comms, chaos reigned. Some commanders screamed for reinforcements. Others begged for mercy. A few cursed humanity's name, remembering the ancient stories. Yet no answer came from the warship. It remained silent, relentless, its weapons singing the only reply. Then, suddenly as it began, the onslaught stopped. The battlefield was unrecognizable. Debris floated where mighty fleets once stood. Fires flickered across broken hulls. Fragments of ships drifted endlessly into the void. The Concordance armadas once feared, as the galaxy's hammer were shattered in minutes, and the warship, touched, drifted calmly through the wreckage. It did not chase the few survivors who fled into hyperspace. It did not taunt, did not broadcast. It simply continued forward, its engines carrying it deeper into the galaxy, as if the battle had been nothing more than a brief delay. Admiral Veyer slumped in his command chair, his face pale with disbelief. His flagship was crippled, most of his fleet destroyed, and yet the enemy had not even spoken. He realized then the most terrifying truth of all. This was not a war. It was a demonstration. Across the surviving ships, whispers spread like wildfire. The word human returned, carried on terrified lips. They spoke of an ancient species once mocked and driven into exile. A species that had vanished from galactic records. A species that now returned in silence. With a weapon, no fleet could survive. Children would hear of this night. Entire civilizations would tremble at the memory. The galaxy's mightiest had faced a single human warship, and none lasted beyond 4 minutes. The intruder vanished into hyperspace, leaving only silence and wreckage behind. And in that silence, the galaxy began to remember its oldest fear. The galaxy had known fear before, but never like this. For centuries, fleets and empires had risen and fallen, but always the balance of power remained. No single ship, no single species, had ever dared to challenge the Great Concordance. That belief shattered the moment the human warship fired. Survivors fled through hyperspace lanes, their ships battered, their voices broken as they sent desperate transmissions. Across systems, word spread faster than light. Reports were fragmented. Filled with panic, an unknown ship destroyed us. It lasted for minutes. It did not speak. It moved through our fleets like fire through paper. The story seemed impossible. Yet the wreckage of proud armadas was undeniable proof. On alien homeworlds, governments gathered in secret chambers. Leaders slammed fists on tables, demanding explanations. Admirals argued, trying to deny the reality. But witnesses, the few who had escaped, spoke with hollow eyes, their voices trembling as they described the destruction. Many refused to call it a ship at all. They said it was something more, a weapon forged beyond comprehension. For the Concordance, shame burned deeper than loss. They had promised the galaxy order had mocked those who doubted their rule. Now their fleets lay in ruins, defeated not by an enemy empire, not by rebellion, but by one vessel silent and unyielding. Meanwhile, in the dark void, the warship traveled on. It made no demands, carried no flags, and offered no words of diplomacy or surrender. Its presence alone was a statement. It glided past colonies and trade routes, silent but always visible, letting itself be seen. Every system it passed through fell into silence, citizens watching in awe and terror. No one dared to fire. No one dared to stop it. To those who had mocked humanity's name, the silence was worse than fire. Myths returned like shadows in the night. Long ago, humanity had been called reckless, fragile, unworthy of the stars. They had been mocked for their dangerous homeworld, labeled deathworlders, and cast aside by civilizations that saw them as savages. Many had laughed when humanity disappeared, believing they had destroyed themselves. But what if they had not perished? What if they had been preparing? On the council world of Velos, the Concordance High Assembly erupted in chaos. Voices shouted over one another. It is impossible. No ship can defeat thousands alone. This is not a ship, it is a trick. We must rally every empire, every fleet. Fear lay beneath their words, a fear none wished to admit. They knew the survivors had not lied. In the middle of their arguments, a transmission cut across the council chamber. Not from the human warship, remained silent, but from a wandering broadcast recorded during the battle. A damaged Avar vessel had sent out a final warning before being destroyed. The recording played in the chamber. Screams echoed, weapons flared, and then a voice cried out, "They are human. The myths are true. Do not," before static swallowed the rest. The chamber fell silent. Not one delegate moved. The word hung in the air like a curse. Human. On distant mining stations, workers whispered the word with fear. On trade routes, captains locked their doors, speaking of humans as if they were monsters. And in schools, children repeated the news story: a single human warship that destroyed entire armadas in 4 minutes. Back in the void. The ship finally broke its silence. It did not broadcast words, but the roar of its weapons echoed again. When an overconfident patrol force attempted to block its path, it responded with the same precision as before. In seconds, dozens of ships turned to dust. The roar of its guns carried across the void, recorded and replayed across thousands of systems. That sound, more than words, became humanity's voice. The galaxy began to realize something terrifying. This was not the limit of human power. If one warship could end fleets, how many more were hidden in the dark? How many waited, silent and unseen? No one knew. That uncertainty broke even the bravest in the wreckage fields. Survivors drifted in escape pods, whispering prayers not to gods but to the hope the warship would not return. Some were rescued and spoke to the galaxy of what they saw. They described not just the destruction, but the silence, the calm, the terrifying patience. It did not fight us as enemies, one survivor said, voice hollow. It fought us as if we were obstacles, nothing more. That truth stung deeper than death. To the mightiest fleets of the galaxy, the human warship had not shown hatred or rage. It had shown indifference. Rumors grew wild. Some claimed the humans had hidden an entire armada beyond the galactic rim. Others whispered that the warship was not crewed at all, but a weapon left to patrol the stars as a warning. And some, the most frightened, whispered that humanity had never disappeared. They had been watching all along. The roar of humanity had begun, not with speeches or banners, but with silence and fire. And across the stars, every alien heart trembled at the thought that the roar had only just started. The galaxy's balance was gone. The future now belonged to the ones they had once laughed at, the ones they had dismissed as weak. Humanity had returned not with mercy, not with words, but with a roar the stars themselves would never forget. The wreckage of the fallen fleets drifted through the void, silent tombs for warriors who once believed themselves immortal. But the battle was not the true weapon. The real weapon was fear, and it spread faster than any ship, faster than any fleet. From system to system, from world to world, whispers carried the story. A human warship had appeared, and none had lasted longer than 4 minutes. In the great markets of the Orion Reach, merchants closed their stalls to gather around broken holoscreens, replaying fragments of transmissions. Blurred images of golden light carving through armadas froze traders in stunned silence. It cannot be real, some muttered. It must be a trick, but the recordings of terrified captains, cut off mid-scream, were too raw to deny. On the mining colonies of the Zell Dominion, workers spoke the word human in hushed voices. To them, the humans had always been shadows from old stories, dangerous dreamers who had vanished long ago. Now the shadows were real, and they had returned with fire. Mothers told their children not to speak the name too loudly, as if saying it might summon the warship to their skies. Governments scrambled. Across a dozen worlds, leaders called emergency councils. Armies were recalled, borders fortified. But even the bravest commanders felt the weight of the truth. No wall of ships could hold back what they had seen. On-coms officers debated endlessly. It must be a prototype weapon. Perhaps it was unmanned, some ancient machine. No species could build such a thing. But every argument ended with silence because deep down they all knew the truth. Humans had done it. Humans, the forgotten exiles, had built something beyond their imagination. On the Concordance Council world, riots broke out in the streets. Citizens demanded answers from their rulers. Why had they been told that humans were weak? Why had they been told humanity had perished? Fear twisted into anger, and anger into chaos. Statues of alien generals were pulled down, burned in fire pits, while children painted crude human silhouettes on walls with the words, "The warship coming." Admirals met in shadowed chambers. trying to form strategies, but every plan died the moment someone asked the question they all dreaded. What if there are more? If one ship could break them, what would an entire fleet of humans do? Some suggested immediate surrender. But surrender to who? The warship had not asked for it. It had spoken no words, made no claims, demanded no territory. It simply destroyed, then moved on. That silence was worse than open war. If the humans had declared themselves conquerors, perhaps the galaxy could have bargained. If they had shouted vengeance, perhaps someone could have pleaded. But they said nothing, and in that nothing, the galaxy felt their own insignificance. The whispers grew into legends overnight. In the far rim colonies, children refused to sleep without watching the stars, afraid they would wake to golden lights tearing their skies apart. On military academies, instructors rewrote training scenarios, adding the human factor, the impossible ship that could not be stopped. And in secret, alien priests began to preach that the humans were not enemies, but punishers, sent by fate to humble the proud. Meanwhile, the warship kept moving. It crossed into sectors where fleets scrambled to intercept, but none dared fire. Entire armadas shifted course, pulling back rather than risk being erased. To see the warship and survive became a strange kind of honor, a mark that one had looked into the storm and lived. In one system, a council of alien admirals attempted a desperate show of strength. Hundreds of ships formed a blockade, engines humming, weapons armed. Their voices crackled across the void, threatening destruction if the warship did not turn back. The human vessel did not slow. It drifted calmly toward them, its lights glowing brighter. For long minutes, the blockade stood frozen. No one dared to fire. Then, one by one, the alien ships pulled away, scattering into the void. The warship passed through untouched, and the galaxy learned again that fear could break even the strongest. Admiral Vare, whose flagship had limped away from the first slaughter, sat alone in his quarters, haunted by the memory. He had seen the golden beams, heard the screams of his officers, felt the shudder of his dying fleet. Now he read report after report of entire regions falling into silence at the warship's passing. His pride was gone, his certainty burned away. He whispered to himself in the dark, the same word countless others whispered in every corner of the galaxy. Human rumors twisted into stories, stories into nightmares. Some claimed the humans had been watching for centuries, waiting for the moment the galaxy grew arrogant enough to deserve punishment. Others said the warship was only a scout, a messenger of a fleet so vast it could blot out suns. And still others whispered that it was not a fleet, at all that humanity itself had become the fleet. Each person bound into the steel of their warships, immortal and endless. The fear was not just in space. On planets, economies trembled. Trade routes collapsed as ships refused to fly near sectors where the warship had been seen. Armies that once marched proudly now locked themselves in garrisons, commanders terrified of being ordered to intercept the intruder in one broadcast. A trembling alien leader addressed his people. His voice shook as he admitted the truth no one wanted to hear. "The humans have returned," he said. "We do not know why. We do not know what they want. But we know this. The galaxy will never again belong only to us." The warship continued forward, silent and steady. It did not announce its destination. It did not turn aside for anyone. Wherever it went, fear arrived first, spreading faster than its engines could carry it. The galaxy had once laughed at humanity. Now it trembled at the soundless roar of their return. Long before the warship appeared, the galaxy believed it understood humanity. To the Concordance archives, humans were reckless, Deathworlders violent, fragile, unfit for the calm order of interstellar society. They had begged for entry into the great councils, seeking alliance, trade, and recognition. Instead, they were mocked. Their world, Earth, was called a cursed place, a planet of storms and poisons where no civilized race could survive. The Concordance declared that no such species could ever bring peace to the stars. At first, humanity endured the laughter. They sent diplomats, explorers, scientists. They tried to prove they could contribute, that they could adapt. But the galaxy only sneered. In one infamous assembly, a Zell speaker had mocked Earth's oceans and storms, saying no species raised in such chaos could build anything lasting. The council laughed. Humanity never forgot. Then came the final insult. Concordance fleets arrived in Seoul, orbiting Earth like predators circling prey. They did not invade openly, but they made their message clear. Humanity had no place in the stars. Any attempt to expand beyond their system would be punished, so humanity disappeared. At least, that is what the galaxy believed. But the truth was different. The whispers now spreading across alien worlds carried fragments of stories, hidden records buried deep in archives, and testimonies from those few who had studied the humans closely before their exile. Humans had not stopped. They had gone silent. They had pulled back into the darkness of their homeworld and the colonies hidden beyond it. For centuries, they spoke no words, made no broadcasts, sent no ambassadors. While the galaxy mocked, humanity built. They stripped their asteroid belts for metals, forged shipyards in orbit of dead moons, and mined their oceans for resources others had overlooked. They designed machines not for commerce, not for diplomacy, but for survival. Every humiliation burned into their memory, every insult shaping the steel of their resolve. And as generations passed, humanity's engineers learned to turn their dangerous home into strength. They adapted their weapons to storms, their armor to radiation, their engines to withstand conditions that would cripple other civilizations. Quietly, humanity transformed. The archives revealed fragments. Deep space probes vanished near the Sol system, their last images showing massive constructions glinting in shadow. Merchant captains who strayed too close never returned. A few who survived spoke of colossal silhouettes moving in the void, ships without names, their hulls black as night. The Concordance dismissed these as fables, never realizing the truth until it was too late. Now, with the warship's sudden arrival, the galaxy finally understood what those centuries of silence had meant. Humanity had not gone extinct. They had prepared. And the vessel that had shattered fleets in minutes was not their first creation. It was only the first the galaxy had been allowed to see. On the Council world, the revelation spread like wildfire. Archivists dug through forgotten records, pulling out old transcripts of Earth's last appeals. In one, a human ambassador had said words the Council had ignored. "If you will not give us a place among you, then we will make one of our own. And when you see us again, you will remember that humanity was never weak." The aliens had laughed then. Now, no one laughed. Admiral Vare, haunted survivor of the first battle, replayed those old words in the quiet of his quarters. His hands trembled as he watched the recordings of human diplomats standing alone before jeering chambers. He realized now that the silence afterward had been no surrender. It had been a promise. On distant worlds, civilians whispered stories of Earth's surface. They spoke of oceans that could swallow fleets, mountains that pierced the skies, storms that lasted for months. They remembered the term the galaxy once used with scorn, Deathworld. Now, it sounded like prophecy. A species that survived such a world could survive anything. A species that grew from such a world could build warships the galaxy could never match. And still, the warship moved forward. It passed through sectors without firing, drifting like a shadow of doom. Its silence was louder than any threat. It made no claim of conquest, demanded no tribute. It needed none. Its very existence was enough. In hidden chambers, Concordance leaders debated their future. Some argued for negotiation. But how does one bargain with silence? Others demanded revenge, but their fleets had already proven powerless. And a few, trembling and desperate, suggested the unthinkable: surrender before a word was even spoken. The galaxy had never feared Earth before. They had only laughed, but now they remembered. They remembered the storms. They remembered the stubborn faces of the diplomats they had scorned. They remembered the warnings hidden in those last words. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of space, the humans remembered too. They remembered every insult. They remembered every humiliation. They remembered every time the galaxy told them they did not belong. Now, their memory had taken shape in steel and fire. And the warship was only the beginning. The galaxy finally understood. Humanity had not returned to ask permission. They had returned to remind the stars why Deathworlders should never be mocked. The galaxy had reached its breaking point. Fear alone could not be allowed to rule. The Concordance called every empire, every fleet, every reserve. From the deep core to the outer rim, warships gathered. It was the largest armada ever assembled. Millions of vessels, entire civilizations might compressed into one united force. They called it the Last Stand. Across countless systems, citizens watched the fleet form. Propaganda broadcasts filled the skies. Leaders declared that unity would defeat the humans, that no single warship could withstand the weight of the galaxy combined. Admirals gave speeches about courage, honor, and vengeance. They spoke loudly, but inside their eyes betrayed doubt. Every one of them knew the truth of the whispers. A single warship had already erased thousands, and still they prepared. Pride demanded it. Fear demanded it. The galaxy could not surrender without a fight. In the cold void of a nameless system, near a burning star, the fleets arranged themselves. Their ships stretched across the darkness in endless formations. Carriers released wings of interceptors. Cruisers locked shields together, building walls of energy thicker than any fortress. Dreadnoughts, larger than cities, aligned their cannons to strike as one. It was a sight so vast it looked less like an armada and more like a second galaxy born of steel and fire. At the center of this storm, Admiral Vare stood once again on the bridge of his rebuilt flagship. He had seen the destruction with his own eyes, and yet he had been chosen to lead this final battle. His voice echoed through the coms, reaching millions of ships. "We are the strength of every world, the hammer of every empire. Today we end the myth. Today we destroy the humans forever." His words were answered by cheers, but they were hollow. Beneath the shouts, silence pressed heavily. Every soldier, every captain, every admiral knew they might be marching into the same 4 minutes of fire. Then the signal came. An energy surge lit up sensors across the armada. A single signature entered the system. It was the same as before, calm and steady, impossible to mistake. The human warship had arrived. It drifted into view, black hole gleaming with golden lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. It came alone, without allies, without banners. Against millions of ships, it looked small, almost fragile. But every eye that saw it remembered what that silence meant. The myths had returned. The order rang out. Fire everything. The galaxy roared. Missiles streaked across the void in burning trails. Plasma beams lanced forward. Rail cannons spat fire that could shatter moons. The combined fury of 1,000,000 ships converged on one vessel. The darkness blazed with so much energy that even the nearby star seemed dim in comparison. For long moments, the warship vanished inside the storm. Hope rose in alien hearts. Perhaps sheer numbers, sheer power, could succeed where arrogance had failed. Perhaps this time the intruder would fall. Then the storm cleared. The warship still stood. Its armor glowed. Golden veins burning brighter than before. The silence that followed was suffocating. And then, with slow and deliberate motion, the warship answered. Its first strike erased thousands of ships in an instant. A golden wave swept through the blockade, cutting dreadnoughts apart as if they were toys. Its weapons shifted like living fire, each shot finding its target with flawless precision. Where it turned, fleets crumbled. Where it passed, armadas dissolved into debris. The battle lasted for minutes. 4 minutes of screams. For minutes of broken pride. For minutes that tore down the mightiest fleet in history. Admiral Vare's flagship shook violently as ship after ship around him was torn apart. He screamed orders, but no formation could hold. No strategy could survive. He watched the galaxy's last stand unravel before his eyes. His heart broke as he realized the truth he had denied for so long. This was not war. This was judgment. When the 4th minute ended, silence fell again. Where millions of ships had stood, only wreckage remained. Fires burned dimly in the void, fragments of once-proud vessels drifting aimlessly. The largest armada ever built was gone. The galaxy's last stand had lasted no longer than all the others, and the human warship, untouched, it moved slowly through the ruins, its golden veins still glowing, casting light across the corpses of fleets. It did not broadcast victory. It did not mock. It simply drifted forward, as if the destruction had been inevitable. Across the galaxy, those watching the battlefield fell into silence. No speeches remained. No leaders raised their voices. Hope had died in 4 minutes. And what replaced it was terror so deep it reached the bones of every living being. The last stand was over. Humanity had not just returned, they had proven that nothing could stand against them. And still, no one knew what they wanted. The battlefield was silent. Where the galaxy's greatest fleets once stretched across the void, only broken fragments remained. Fires flickered faintly among the debris, and shattered hulls drifted aimlessly, no longer bound by formation or command. The last stand was over. It had ended in 4 minutes, just like all the battles before. Through the wreckage, the human warship glided. Its black hull gleamed with the glow of golden veins, casting an eerie light across the graveyard of ships. It moved with calm precision, as though nothing had happened, as though millions of soldiers had not screamed into the dark only moments before. To the warship, the destruction was not a victory. It was routine. On distant worlds, the broadcasts ended. Screens went black. Leaders sat frozen in their palaces, their speeches forgotten, their promises hollow. Citizens gathered in streets and stared at the sky, knowing that somewhere above the warships still moved. No words had been spoken, no demands had been made. Yet every civilization now understood. The galaxy was no longer theirs to command. In the ruins of the Concordance Council chambers, silence stretched long. For generations, those walls had echoed with arrogance, with laughter at humanity's name. Now no one dared to speak it. The word carried too much weight, too much power. Some whispered it as a curse, others as a prayer. But all agreed on one thing: humans had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Vare sat alone on his crippled flagship, the last survivor of the battle. He looked out across the wreckage with hollow eyes. His crew was gone, his fleets destroyed. Around him, silence pressed like a tomb. He thought of the old days, when humans had stood in council halls begging for recognition, mocked and dismissed by those who believed themselves superior. He had been one of the mockers. He had laughed when humanity was exiled, and now he watched as their vengeance, silent and absolute, rewrote the galaxy's fate. The warship slowed near the edge of the system. For the first time, it sent out a single pulse of energy that echoed across the void. It was not words, not language, but every sensor that captured it carried the same meaning. It was a message not of conquest, but of warning. The pulse said, "We are here. Remember us." Then the warship vanished into hyperspace. Disappearing in a flash of golden light, the galaxy held its breath. Days passed, then weeks, then months, and still no other human ships appeared. The lone vessel became legend. On frontier worlds, traders told stories of its black hull, its golden fire, and the silence that followed it. Children whispered the tale to one another at night. The humans had returned, and their warship could erase entire fleets in 4 minutes. Parents shushed them. But even the parents whispered the story when the lights were dim. Priests on alien temples declared that the humans were the hand of fate, punishing the arrogant for their sins. Soldiers who once marched proudly now feared even the mention of humanity, their courage broken by what they had seen. Admirals redrew maps of the galaxy, leaving blank spaces where they imagined human fleets might rise again. The myth grew larger than the truth. Some believed the humans had built thousands of warships, hidden beyond the galactic rim, waiting for the moment to strike. Others swore the warship itself was not a ship at all, but a living being, the embodiment of Earth's wrath, drifting from system to system, And still others whispered that the humans had already taken their revenge and would never appear again, leaving only their shadow to haunt the stars. But the fear never faded. Every time an unknown signal appeared on sensors, fleets scrambled in terror. Every time a ship vanished in deep space, whispers of the warship returned. The galaxy learned to live with silence, always listening for the roar they dreaded but could never stop. In the end, it was not the destruction of fleets that changed the galaxy. It was the memory. The humans did not conquer planets or raise banners. They did not demand tribute or rewrite laws. They did something far greater. They left a scar in the hearts of every species, a whisper that echoed louder than any war. Do not mock humanity. Do not forget humanity. For if you do, the warship will come again. And so the galaxy lived in the shadow of that whisper. Civilizations rebuilt their fleets, but none with pride. Leaders gave speeches, but their words carried the weight of fear. Children grew up under the legend of humans, taught to respect the silence and the stars. The warship never returned. Or perhaps it did, unseen, gliding in the dark where no eyes could find it. But the effect was the same. Humanity had no need to fight again. Their silence was enough. And somewhere, across the void, on a world once mocked and forgotten, humans watched the stars. They remembered the insults, the exile, the scorn. But more than anything, they remembered the roar that had shaken the galaxy, because they knew the truth that every alien now feared. The warship had been only one. The whisper in the stars would never fade. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never laugh again.